Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Today, I'm bringing you an episode decided on by my Patreon's Quasar Commander, the highest possible tier. They get to pick a topic every month, and we've been on kind of a wild ride these past few months. Instead of tackling defined archetypes, they've been more interested in seeing the sprawling lives and legacies of Yu-Gi-Oh's many characters, not from the anime, but from the cards themselves. We've talked about two distinct goblins, one who can't catch a break in terms of social interactions, and another that can't catch a break in the financial sector. But today, we're veering off course to talk about a character that hasn't just gone through their own journey across the years, but has split off into several different versions of themselves, which have traveled from here to the other side of the multiverse and all the way back again. Strap in, cause it's time for the life and times of Warrior Dai Grepher Explained. Today's episode is possible thanks to viewers like you, as well as my patrons. If you like what I do here, I would super appreciate it if you'd subscribe to help us reach another wonderful milestone video, and if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome benefits, check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. So, what's the deal with Warrior Dai Grepher? Well, it's a level 4 Earth Warrior normal monster with 1700 attack and 1600 defense, and is the warrior who can manipulate dragons. Nobody knows his mysterious past. Which would be a fun design space to work with, but for us, we're looking forward to this card's future. See, while Grepher didn't have a huge impact on the game itself, its two claims to fame being a normal monster with decent stats, and two being the poster child of the warrior toolbox effects that were popular at the time, it would spin off into a number of different alternate universe versions, with some being downright meta-defining. This is shown in the normal trap card, the Path of Destiny, which has both players tossing a coin. If a player's result is heads, they gain 2,000 life points, and if it's tails, they lose 2,000 life points. It's only really had a home in Nurse Burn decks, where you can basically turn this into a guaranteed 2,000 points of damage to your opponent, but in Grepher's lore, this is a turning point that can decide many of their future forms, as he happens upon this at the end of a massive battle that has destroyed all of his friends. So before we go over all the spell and trap cards that mark the journey of this dragon-dominating warrior, let's get a handle on how many forms we'll have to keep track of. Dark Grepher is a level 4 Dark Warrior monster with 1700 attack and 1600 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding a level 5 or higher Dark monster. And while on the field, you can discard a Dark monster to send a Dark monster from your deck to the grave. So when I say that there were Greffers that were responsible for setting the course of a whole era of the game, this is what I'm talking about. Dark is an attribute that's always been powerful in this game, but it was the release of Phantom Darkness that solidified their position as one of the premier attributes you could be using. Dark Armed Dragon was a big part of this, and for good reason. It was a huge body you could summon out of nowhere, could destroy at least 3 cards in a single turn, and basically if you landed it on the board, it was the end of the game. And Dark Grepher was one of its best enablers. Pitching a Dark for the special summon, and then discarding a Dark to send a Dark would put exactly 3 Dark monsters into your graveyard. And then, as we got into the Teledad era, it was a discard outlet for one of the best Dark monsters in the game, Destiny Hero Malicious, basically giving you 6 free non-tuner levels to work with alongside your Psychic Tuner of choice that you of course summoned with Emergency Teleport. There was a time where this card was among the many that demanded respect through fear, and while Armageddon Knight has ended up being the Dark Warrior that sends more Dark monsters to the grave of choice in the modern day, back then, it and Dark Grepher stood shoulder to shoulder at the top of the mountain, and boy howdy did he go all out in the costuming department. I hope Grepher kept all the receipts so he could expense all that towards the company, because the custom evil armor and the full dye job must have cost him a pretty penny. And I know he's not making that kind of money on his salary. Remember, crime doesn't pay. Dark Lucius level 4 is an Earth Fiend monster with 1000 attack and 300 defense, and you negate the effects of your opponent's monsters destroyed by battle with this card. And once per turn during the standby phase of your next turn after this card has destroyed a monster by battle, you can send this card to the grave to special summon a Dark Lucius level 6 from your hand or deck. This seems like a far cry away from Grepher, but if you look closely, you can see it has the same distinct headband as the Dragon Warrior. But if you want something more concrete, falling down shows the process happening in real time, with a lot more of the original Grepher's features being seen here. And for further proof, we actually have confirmation from one of the master guides, which relates a lot of the lore that's otherwise hidden among the cards. This particular excerpt shows that Dark Lucius is the result of going down the dark path of destiny, which you might find strange since you would think that Dark Grepher would be at the end of the dark path. And you would be right, with the spell card Painful Return showing 2 more paths within the Twisted Woods of Evil, one leading to Dark Grepher and one leading to his fiendish transformation. We even know exactly how it goes down too. Going down the Lucius path, Dai Grepher runs headfirst into one of the Guardian monsters, a series of monsters that are tied to specific equip spells. In this instance, it's Bao, wielding its famous wicked-breaking flamberge. Despite the boost from the weapon, the Fiend was no match for Dai Grepher and was slain, though it did break Grepher's sword in the process. He decided to use the Fallen Fiend's sword as a replacement, as seen in Morale Boost, but that's where the final trick comes into play. Bao was nothing more than a projection. The sword itself was the demonic guardian, and so with Grepher wielding it, he became a man possessed, and thus took on his monstrous form. And that's not even the end of it. As a level monster, Lucius would grow stronger and stronger as they continued to wield their unnatural power. Dark Lucius level 6 has 1700 attack and 600 defense, with basically the same effect as level 4, but the level up effect is a bigger hurdle this time. It has to actually negate an opponent's monster's effect, which means it can't level up by destroying a normal or non-effect monster, which is very, very funny. And finally, Dark Lucius level 8 has 2800 attack and 900 defense, and if special summoned by the effect of Dark Lucius level 6, it banishes your opponent's monsters destroyed by battle with this card, also negate their effects. Not nearly worthwhile enough to invest all the time and energy into summoning this, but it does look rad as hell. But I can't help but notice that this is not using Wicked Breaking Flamberge Bao. Did, like, the sword level up too? Are we looking at some kind of Dark Cloud situation? Because if so, this game has somehow become even cooler. Now let's take a look at what happens when Warrior Dai Grepher decides to travel down the Path of Light. Once again, Master Guide 2 has us covered, letting us know that he meets the monster Spirit Ryu along the way and becomes the fusion monster Ryu Senshi, a level 6 Earth Warrior fusion monster with 2000 attack and 1200 defense, requiring Warrior Dai Grepher and Spirit Ryu as material. A fusion summon of this card can only be done with the above fusion material, and when a normal trapped card is activated as a quick effect, you can pay 1000 life points to negate that effect, but this card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. Also, negate the effects of any spell card that targets this card and destroy it. That means any spell card, even your own, though this does keep any devious demon-possessed swords from corrupting us, so I guess that's nice. But while making this the hard way wasn't really the norm, this actually saw a bit of play as a good option to summon off of Magical Scientist, giving you a way to protect yourself against some of the game's most powerful trap cards at the time. However, it has since faded into obscurity, and for the life of me, I can't tell you why. Every other form of Grepher has some kind of reference card, but this one appears to be non-existent in the expanded canon. And that's a real shame, because this design rips. It's like a biker knight equipped with a double-ended sword. Is it practical? Absolutely not. But is it awesome? I was raised on too much Star Wars Episode 1 to think otherwise. Now, that's all the info we get from the Master Guide, but I feel like there are at least 2 more that should be valid outcomes in the Path of Light. Light Ray Grepher is a level 4 light monster with 1700 attack and 1600 defense, and it works basically exactly like Dark Grepher, just swap out all the instances of dark in the effect for light. Though, instead of sending a light monster from deck to graveyard, you actually banish a light from your deck instead. This meshes pretty well with the Light Ray theme, but not entirely. Half of them need you to have a certain amount of banished light monsters, while others are looking for light monsters in your graveyard, which I suppose is covered by discarding for cost and banishing as part of the effect, but considering the amount of monsters they want to see to fulfill the summon requirements, I don't think we're getting there anytime soon. And on top of that, Light Ray is a lot less universally useful to lights as Dark Grepher is to dark, but it seems like a pretty good pairing with a deck like Metaphys. I'm sure there will be a point in the game where Light Ray Grepher's unique properties will come into play, but for now, it's an interesting oddity more than anything else. And it has an outfit probably just as expensive as Dark Grepher's. All those blue RGBs aren't exactly easy to come across, especially in a custom leather armor corset thing. Who does this guy's wardrobe? Dai Grepher is a level 4 light warrior Gemini monster with 1700 attack and 1600 defense, and when treated as an effect monster during your end phase, you can target an equip spell card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. This aligns Grepher with the big equip card loving sub-theme, though with his penchant for picking up cursed swords, he should probably be a lot more careful. This specifically lines up with the Gemini warriors that like equip spells, so that's really cool. And the coolness doesn't stop there. We may be able to look at this as an inverse Dark Lucius. Just like how the Evil Path had a version of Grepher that was possessed by a guardian weapon, we actually see Dai wielding the twin swords of Flashing Light Trice and the spell card Swords at Dawn. Gotta love the attention to strange multiversal continuity, but I am not sold on this effect. We already have to wait a turn to do the extra normal summon in a vacuum. Why do we have to wait till the end phase to get the equip card into our hand? Heck, at that point, why not just let us equip the dang thing? Like, there aren't a lot of good Grepher monsters out there, and I would say this is a lot better than any of the Lucius cards, but this is just sad to look at. And after all that time that Dai took to style their hair, the biggest upgrade this card has is that they finally moved away from the dorky bowl cut. And lastly, we have Chaos Grepher, a level 4 light warrior monster with 1700 attack and 1600 defense, but while on the field, it is also treated as a dark attribute monster. You can discard a light or dark monster to send a light or dark monster with a different attribute from your deck to the grave, but for the rest of the turn, you can't special summon monsters with the same name the sent monster had in the grave. I've gone more into detail on how this card interacts with the Chaos related cards in their own video, but in regards to the Grepher multiverse, this card is an enigma. I have to imagine that this is some kind of in-between form, either transitioning from one to another, or the result of an untread path being taken, which probably makes this the most badass of all the Greffers, not satisfied to walk the paths dictated to it by some morally definitive woods. This Grepher finds its own destiny. Heck, even the dorky bowl cut looks good here. How did he manage to do that? Alright, that does it for the Greffers. Now it's time for the spell cards. First up, let's take a brief look at Painful Return, a normal spell card that has your opponent choosing one monster in your grave, and during the end phase, adds that monster to your hand. So, obviously, this card sucks, but under what circumstances could it be good? Well, it'd have to be a deck that has its monsters leave the grave a lot, one way or the other, leaving only a single option, forcing your opponent to pick it. This could be something like Invoked, banishing a number of your monsters to narrow down the choices, or the Poker Knights, which have a number of cards that shuffle your other monsters back into the deck. It can also be used in decks with discard monsters for effects that you want to get back into your hand, like Nekroz. Lead by discarding Brionac, then immediately fire off Painful Return while it's the only monster in your graveyard. But like I said, there are some pretty narrow scenarios in which this can be usable, and even if you do make it so your opponent picks what you want, you still have to wait until the end phase. So I think the best thing we can do to avoid all the pain is to not return to this card, ever. Unexpected Dai is a normal spell card that you can activate if you control no monsters to special summon a level 4 or lower normal monster from your deck. This card is, despite being normal monster support, a huge buff to a number of decks. Several themes utilize normal monsters as a kind of negative to justify doing really cool and powerful stuff, with notable archetypes being Magic-y, Suship, and probably the most explosive of them all, Sunseed. Having a way to turbo out Genius Loci to start your plays off without even having to use your normal summon is fantastic, and we haven't even scratched the surface on what this card enables otherwise. You could summon out normal tuners to make easy synchros, summon out Gladiator Beast Andal for more bodies to contact fuse with, summon out Harpy Ladies to make use of Elegant Egotist and Harpy Featherstorm. You can even get more material for your World Legacy spamming. This card sees play in a wild number of decks and is a real game changer. It really does live up to its name, and that's to say nothing of the Grepher implications. The far background has a number of different dimension portals. We've seen this across a number of cards both involving Grepher and not, but it's the rest of the card that fascinates me. It's a very digital looking landscape with all these wireframes going around, and looks very similar to the same landscape we've seen in the card Terminal World. Awfully suspicious, wouldn't you say? Almost makes you think that everything is dual terminal, wouldn't you say? Gravity Lash is a quick play spell card that targets a face-up monster on the field, and it loses attack equal to its defense until the end of the turn. This came out in the same core set as Link monsters, so this is meant to be a kind of catch-all debuff that doesn't work on Link monsters to encourage the use of them. And, you know, also monsters with 0 defense. Thanks, Goki! It's a pretty fun limited card to be sure, and its power will depend on the cards surrounding it. But as for the lore, it seems that Dai Grepher has had a run-in with another Guardian weapon. But instead of Gravity Axe Grawl joining or cursing him, it just straight up wants nothing to do with him, and I love it. Does make me want to see a Guardian retrain archetype centered on Grepher though. That'd be sick. Swords at Dawn is a quick play spell card that targets an equipped spell in your grave and an appropriate monster on the field, and equip that equipped spell to that monster, but destroy that equipped spell during the end phase. But if you activate this card, you can't special summon for the rest of the turn. This card is a pretty mixed bag. Obviously, because it limits your special summons, it's pretty much off most people's radar. It's arguably the most important mechanic of Yu-Gi-Oh!, so halting any forward momentum to activate this is a big no-no. But as a quick play spell card, you can play this during your opponent's turn, when you aren't going to be special summoning as much, depending on your theme of course. And in that regard, it's a pretty neat way to sneak and equip onto a monster, especially once your opponent's already committed to an attack, at least until the end of the turn, which has some uses. Notably, it was reprinted in its best foiling, by the way, Platinum Rare, as part of the Noble Knights of the Round Table product, because it interacts with the Noble Arms in a fun way. Once per turn when they get destroyed, they can re-equip to a Noble Knight monster that you control, thus making it so you get to keep the Noble Arm you equip off of Swords at Dawn. The issue was that the Xyz monsters of that theme were already very proficient at grabbing swords back from the graveyard on their own, and the scenarios in which you would need to equip a card to our main deck monsters is also ones that don't pan out because of the special summon lock. You can't use Swords at Dawn to equip Madrot during your own turn to use its effective special summon. And if it was misplaced in Noble Knights, you better believe it was absolutely alien to every other deck. Equipped spells are widely avoided in this game due to their inherent downside of making your resources more vulnerable. So most brewers tend to avoid them unless they provide some absolutely ridiculous effect. And those are either very few and far between, or so specific to an archetype that they already have the tools to utilize it effectively enough. The solution to this was not to print a card that recovered those while also slapping you with a harsh condition. And on top of all that, they named it Swords at Dawn and didn't even give it a cool battle or fighting mechanic to make it a duel or something. Well, I mean, within the duel. Like, imagine you have to equip 2 monsters with 2 different equip spells, one from each side of the field, and those 2 have to fight each other immediately. Then you can do funny stuff like giving your opponent bad equip spells like Dark World Shackles. That would be so fun. Wait, why did they call it Dark World like that? They have a Dark World archetype. What's going on here? Attack Pheromones is a continuous spell card that makes it so if your monster attacks a defense position monster, you change that monster to face-up attack position at the end of the damage step if your attacking monster is reptile type. I swear I must have talked about this during Reptilands Explained, but it turns out it completely went over my head. Probably because the card meant to support them doesn't include a single member of the theme in the art. The short version is that Reptilands have a lot of effects that set opposing monsters' attacks to 0, which isn't very helpful if your opponent turtles up, so this forces them into a more favorable position. At least for you. That being said, I'd rather not waste my battle phase trying to accomplish that, thank you very much. I'd much rather use other effects during main phase 1 so I'm not being surprised by interruptions during the battle phase. As for how Grepher is involved, this doesn't technically connect them with Reptilands because, like we said, not in the art. However, it does connect them with the Venom cards, because, you know, the deity of poisonous snakes is here. Now, I know I'm a big proponent for the everything is dual terminal theory, you can't take that away from me, but some crossovers are just too outlandish to consider canon. Black Return is my go-to example of this, because despite putting Barkion and Abora in the same card art, I don't think the Black Wings were secretly in the background helping to deal with the worms in the Fabled. But if they're not canon, then what are they? Well, I like to chalk these up as a duel actually in progress, not as an event taking place in one of the stories. So likewise, I'm not quite sure how Venomanaga ties into Dai Grepher's travel across the multiverse, but considering how crisscrossed his personal timeline is, if this is somehow canon, I think there's enough ambiguity in there to let that happen. Now, how he survived this encounter, I'm not so sure, but Dai Grepher is something of a ladies' man, so, you know, I've heard of worse escape plans than dinner in a movie. He may not be able to court DD Warrior Lady, but maybe he's got that snake god riz, you know? Morale Boost is a continuous spell card that increases a player's life points by 1,000 each time they equip an equipped spell, regardless of what it's equipped to. Likewise, each time an equipped spell is removed from the field, the controller of that equipped spell takes 1,000 points of damage. So the strategy here is kinda cool. You throw this down, put on some equipped spells, then find a way to get rid of Morale Boost before you lose all your equips, and boom, you got a lot of life points. But on the flip side, if your opponent is someone who plays a lot of equipped spells, you can play this after they've done so, then get rid of all those equipped spells to deal them an enormous amount of burn damage. But there's never really been a shell for this card to really excel in. If Arrow Mages used equipped spells more often, maybe this would make for a great way to turbocharge your life points right out of the gate to enable all their bonus effects, but that is sadly not the case. And it doesn't help that it cares about who controls the equipped spell, not the monster it's equipped to. So you're not able to force equipment onto your opponent only to burn them later. Sorry Morale Boost, but we've got to add you to the big pile of cards with janky effects that may one day get a build around when some poor schmuck has too much time on their hands and is looking to brew. And also for helping to flesh out the Dark Lucius storyline. Seriously, Guardian Dai Grepher deck when? We need it! Get me into the boardroom and we will make something happen. The A-Forces is a continuous spell card that boosts all warrior monsters you control by 200 attack for each warrior and spellcaster monster that you control. This is another card that does a lot of work when it comes to providing world building for Dai Grepher and his crew. He rolls not only with martial fighters, but wizened spellcasters as well, but ones that only seem to do support magic since spellcasters don't benefit from the boost here. I wish the art didn't have such a big obscuring effect in the background because it's only just now that I'm looking at higher quality art that there's a dragon behind it. So it's not just a cool backdrop, it's actually a magical barrier protecting the citizens from a draconic threat. Now, as a card, it's not really that great. It encourages a going wide strategy, and to its credit, it's one of those attack bonuses that can get out of hand really quickly. For instance, one warrior means it only gets a 200 attack boost. Get 2 warriors, they're both gaining 400 attack, which is a total of 800. Get 3, that's 600 apiece, meaning a total of 1800 extra attack that you didn't have beforehand. But even the increased speed of summoning and a whole new monster zone you can use has not given this the kind of impact needed to make a difference. That being said, as a card you would play during your time on the playground or the lunch table, this card was a legend. In lower powered formats, boosting your squad by even a few hundred points was enough to make this a welcome addition to your deck. And if you played 2-way forces, 3 of them? Aw man, now you had a party going on. This card has a lot of old school energy, so even if it's worth less than dirt today, I can't feel anything but good warm fuzzies when looking at this card. Call me John Hannibal Smith, cause I love it when a plan comes together. Falling Down is an equipped spell card that you activate by targeting an opponent's monster. Equip to that monster, and you take control of it. However, you destroy it unless you control an Archfiend card, and during your opponent's standby phase, you take 800 damage. I go into more detail about this in the Archfiend video, probably has one of my favorite thumbnails by the way, but in short, it's an interesting inverse of Snatch Steel. As part of the Grepher continuity, however, wow did they get graphic with the imagery, and the way all the clothing tears and distorts under the stress of him growing rocks out of his skin, the expression, even the drool showing that he's lost all bodily control while experiencing such a painful transformation is incredibly evocative. Just imagining this happening to any creature that you target with this effect is enough to give you goosebumps. Weird that it needs an Archfiend to stick around though. Lucius doesn't seem to have anything to do with them, or Bao for that matter. Huh. Array of Revealing Light is a field spell card that has you declaring a monster type when activated, and any monster of the declared type can't declare an attack during the turn they're normal summoned, special summoned, or flip summoned. This is another piece of classic older card design, looking to provide something helpful without being super overpowered, but failing to do anything at all. Case in point, it's a field spell card that stops attacks, but only on the turn a monster is summoned, and even then, it only stops one of the game's myriad monster types at a time. And heaven forbid you and your opponent end up on the same one. The most notable thing about this card is that the glyph of the array is the one found on Ryu Senshi's hand, so this is somehow related to one of Grepher's good endings, but the way it's presented in the Master Guide, the array is used before the Path of Destiny choice, cast by one of his companions to keep him safe from a monster attack. So exactly how it's connected is unclear. Trivia pages involving Ryu Senshi will tell you that the array was integral to the fusion between Dai Grepher and Spirit Ryu, but because the Path of Destiny is between between those two events, I'm not quite certain where this information is coming from. Honestly, if we had a stronger grasp on theming, the array of revealing light glyph would be on every Grepher that takes place after this, a mark to remind him of the friends that protected him against the dangers of the world, the friends he himself could not save, no matter what path he travels. Maybe the glyph is a reminder to carry on their legacy and to choose the path of righteousness. Maybe it's an ancient reminder of an old pain that they used to have before their heart was swallowed by darkness. Instead, it only shows up on a fusion that no one uses anymore, and it's all they remember it for. Cool goblins on this one though, hope we get to see more of these in the future. Alright, all the spells are done, now it's time for the trap cards. Die Dance is a normal trap card that has you choosing an opponent's unused main monster zone. If your opponent would normal or special summon a monster to their main monster zone and the chosen zone can be used, they must use that zone. And they can't summon multiple monsters to their main monster zones while this effect is applied. And it continues to apply until the zone is occupied or becomes unusable. And you can only apply the effect of Die Dance once per duel. Wow, there is just so much to say about this card. Effect-wise, it's got two facets. First, the complicated and boring one. You essentially have an effect that forces your opponent to summon to a zone, except not really, because if it's not possible to summon to that zone, you get a pass. Like, if I designated Zone 5 for this effect, but my opponent has a Link monster that points to Zones 1 and 3, they'd still be able to summon a Link monster to those zones. But if they summoned anything else, it would have to go to Zone 5. But if we were to summon a Link monster that pointed a Link arrow towards their Zone 5, then they would have to summon that Link monster to that zone, ignoring 1 and 3, which means that Die Dance is here specifically to force the effect of like topologic monsters. Maybe set up Mech Knight columns. Blasting Fuse would be pretty funny. But yeah, it's very convoluted zone summon manipulation. But now, the short, sweet, and interesting facet. This is a Pendulum Floodgate. That cheeky little parenthetical text was probably there to curb arguments about how technically any monster summoned as part of a simultaneous summon could go to the designated zone, and figuring out how you would hash things out in that regard would be a mess. So, because they went with this explanation, Pendulum Summoning is shut right off, at least insofar as summoning to the main monster zone goes. And it also does a number on other simultaneous summoning effects, though those aren't super relevant. So yeah, weird stuff going on here, but we've already talked about it enough. As for the art, this is one of the cards that shows Dai Grepher trying to romance DD Warrior Lady, someone who we will see has actually had a lot of run-ins with Grepher on the battlefield before they made their DD transition. I guess something about having a biometallic arm really does something for him. Really, the whole composition here is bizarre, but I love it. Heck, even the accompanying musical talent is on brand. I mean, just about everything can find its way into the different dimensions, so why not some musicians willing to help set the scene? I'm down. Dark Light is a normal trap card that tributes a dark monster with 1500 or more attack to destroy all monsters that were special summoned this turn. This is an interesting little trap card that can undermine an opponent's turn at a number of different stages, and got a huge boost in power with the release of the Layer of Darkness structure deck, letting us use an opponent's monster to pay for this, especially if it's a normal summoned monster or one summoned on a previous turn, ones that wouldn't be covered by the destruction effect. But it doesn't do a lot for the Grepher front, at least as far as lore is related. All it has is Dark Hit in the Dio pose, and I'm sorry, we've got to do better. It's no longer enough to elicit a "is this a JoJo reference" reaction. Amazonists already have the market cornered on that one. We have to find something unique here. Different Dimension Encounter is a normal trap card where, if both players have at least one banished monster that can be special summoned, each player special summons one of their banished monsters in face down defense position. So we've essentially printed the Shallow Grave, but for the banishment. That's actually kind of cool, but a bit harder to pull off thanks to using the second graveyard instead of the regular graveyard. And the Shallow Grave already wasn't seeing widespread play to begin with. This could have a good shell, I just don't know what it is yet. It's the art that's fantastic though. Dark Lucius gets a little cameo here, and reinforces my take that it parallels Night Day Grepher, since those are the two running into each other, and they are not happy to see how different things could have been. Now get Dark Grepher in here, and we can do the Spider-Man meme. Different Dimension Ground is a normal trap card that, during the turn this card was activated, has any monster sent to the grave get banished instead. This is a card with a lot of baggage. Before there was Dimension Shifter, there was DD Ground. People were running this from here to there as a way to shut off the grave because at some point it was just the best place for you to start putting cards in. In fact, there's an argument for it being more oppressive than D-Shifter because you could do all the grave stuff that you wanted, set this, then flip it during your opponent's turn, and now they have to play under this while you didn't have to. D-Shifter lets the person going second interact this way, and thankfully works on both turns so it's not as one-sided. But D-Shifter comes with all of its own issues, so we'll have to leave that for there for now. Suffice it to say, this card was one of the first to chafe people on the idea of lingering floodgates, and I can't blame them. Those really suck. As for the art, this is pretty interesting, because it shows DD Warrior Lady squaring off not against Dai Grepher, but Dark Lucius, knocking them into a DD portal, which presumably leads to the DD encounter from the last card, and might be coloring their perception of Grepher moving forward if one of their possible outcomes is turning into a fiend. Now, how Dark Lucius came to arrive in the different dimension is anyone's guess, but it boggles my mind that he's still stuck at level 4. After all this time, you couldn't find a single monster to defeat to get to level 6? It had 4 years to figure something out. Couldn't you have found a single equip spell to help with this? I mean, you should have Flamberge, but you're not even carrying it for crying out loud. What's going on here? Dimension Wall is a normal trap card that activates only when an opponent's monster declares an attack. Instead of you, your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from that battle. This is kind of like a whack-ass magic cylinders, but it doesn't target, so it gets around some of those protections, but it also does a lot less too. You'll still lose a monster if you lose out in battle, and because it reflects only the battle damage you would have taken, the amount you burn for will be a lot less. But at the time, you didn't have much of a choice. After all, did you know that Magic Cylinder was limited from near its release and wouldn't be brought back to a full 3 copies until nearly a decade later? So Dimension Wall has some breathing room to work with until better options availed themselves. But this card clears up a lot of other questions, namely why DD Warrior Lady is so hesitant to return Grepher's affections. On top of possibly being a fiend demon, he previously tried to do a sword murder on her. At least, God, I hope that's the order of events here. If this is how Grepher gets after being rejected, then I am sorry. How is this not the Dark Grepher? Yeesh. Dimensional Inversion is a normal trap card that you can only activate when any number of monsters you own are removed from play by an opponent's card effect, and you special summon one of those monsters. So if you're worried that your opponent is going to hit you with a Karma Cut, or Dimensional Prison, or Bottomless Trap Hole, you can just bring it right back. But it doesn't just care about what monsters get banished from your field. You just have to own those monsters, which means if you encounter some graveyard hate by something like DD Crow or the Bestials, you can also use Dimensional Inversion at that point to get the monster onto your field. But boy howdy, having to chain it directly to the banished, that's rough. Imagine if Monster Reborn or Call of the Haunted had to do that. How wild would that be? So yeah, not really a fan, but it is a Cyber Dark Impact card, so I can't really expect much from it. Though, this art shows Dai Grepher with a DD arm. Well, at least it's beginning the stages of turning into one. And it's got the same kind of biomechanical setup as the DD Warrior Lady. How is that not turned up in any of the other arts? You know, between this and the Array Glyph, I'm starting to think that Dai Grepher is immune to any arm-related lore continuity. Interesting skill, I wonder how we can apply that. Double Die is a normal trap card that you can activate for one of 2 effects. If you control no monsters, special summon a level 4 warrior monster from your deck, or target a warrior monster you control to special summon an earth warrior monster with an equal or lower level from your deck or grave. This is kind of funny. Level 4 warriors are some of the best monsters in the game, so getting one out for free is kind of wild. Just a shame it's tied to a trap card like this. It's funny that the second effect only summons an Earth Warrior since Night Day is a light monster, but that's probably the target we're supposed to use to base the Warrior's level off of. And hey, Dai Grepher is actually teleporting in from Unexpected Dai right in the background, so it checks out. Hopefully one day we'll learn why the different dimension is thirsting for so many Greffers. Eventually they're gonna run out of mediocre white guys and start looking for more, so, you know, if I stop uploading, you'll know why. Expendable Die is a normal trap card that tributes a warrior monster to target a card on the field and destroy it, and if you do, draw a card. It's kind of cool to see warriors get their own version of Icarus attack. It's also an even trading card economy, with you trading a trap card and a monster to remove an opponent's card and get you a draw. So not only is the removal flexible, you can even dig deeper for more cards. But, you know, There's a reason Icarus attack used to be the height of interaction. Nowadays, if you knock out a single card with destruction, and you'll be lucky if all that happens is that it floats. More than likely, you'll find that you've lopped off one head of a Hydra, and now you have 3 more ones to deal with on the counterattack. So, it's not the best, but it's cool to see Grepher and the A-Force's crew on another adventure. Winged Helmet Warrior guy is there. We have got to give them a monster card. The helpless little guy from A-Forces is down there. They've got to stop getting in trouble like this. And Dai Grepher's ready to go ham on Despair from the Dark. Time to add another random monster to the multiversal crossover cast. How did Dai get here is a... I love these card names. I love them so much. How did Dai get here is a normal trap card that, if a monster you control is destroyed by your opponent's attack or card effect, you place face up in your field zone a field spell card from your deck with a different name than the cards in the field zones. Then, reveal 5 monsters from your deck that can be special summoned, with different names from each other, and your opponent randomly picks one for you to special summon. Also, shuffle the rest into the deck. That's right, they made a card that isekais your monsters. They get hit by Truck-kun, and suddenly they're in a new body in a new landscape. And no, you don't get to pick the body you're reincarnated into because we're going for realism here, gosh darn it! It's a funny card, and does give you a new monster and field spell, which is some nice value, but far too unreliable to actually use it properly. But I'm so glad that they printed this because it's added even more ridiculous crossovers to the Grepher list. If you haven't recognized the characters in here, Grepher has landed smack dab in the middle of a village with Mayakashis in their human form roaming around. So them and the Shiranui are in the mix too. What is going on in the writer's room? Premature Return is a normal trap card that banishes a card from your hand, then targets one of your banished monsters and special summons it in face-down defense position. This is a pretty funny utility card, especially if you like banishing monsters. You can fast track one right out of your hand while getting one back, though it's going to be face down, which means you're not going to get the immediate gratification that monster would provide, which kind of sucks. This is another super niche option that isn't very impactful, but it is another point of connection between certain storylines. With Dai Grepher here, we've also got DD Crazy Beast and his Goblin Coach, but that was kind of a given. The Earth Psychics, thanks to Esper Girl, and good old Gibba Gabba Gigo Bigo Bigongo Bongo. Yeah, Premature is right, because this thing needs a lot more time to cook. Sakuretsu Armor is a normal trap card that you can activate when your opponent declares an attack and you target the attacking monster and to destroy that target. Talk about your OG staples. This was a big card back in the day. You could out basically anything with this, especially with back row removal not being as prevalent at the time. Though there really isn't much more to talk about here. It's basically a poor man's Mirror Force, but that didn't stop it from being an icon, and it shows Dark Lucius tearing it up. Wait, it's destroying 2 dudes right here. How was he not leveled up yet? Are you telling me that the card mechanics don't reflect the world in the story? I just can't believe this. I'm shocked. Agog with shock even. Simultaneous Loss is a normal trap card that has each player sending the top card of their deck to the grave. Yeah, both players just mill 1. Not really anything here. It does show Grepher and DD Warrior Lady's first clash back when she was just Warrior Lady of the Wasteland. But how do you hit your swords together so hard they go spinning off in 2 different directions like that? And they're still intact. Now that's quality craftsmanship. Cry Havoc is a continuous trap card that lets you remove from play a monster from your grave to normal summon or set a normal monster from your hand. But you can only activate this effect during your main phase. So it's not necessarily reaching ultimate offering levels of power, but extra normal summons are pretty sweet. Though only normal monsters get to benefit from it, and unfortunately, even the decks that run normal monsters only do so in limited quantities. Certainly not an amount that would actually benefit from this. But hey, it's more crossover time. Here we've got the Hunter with 7 weapons and a Dragon Manipulator, so it looks like Dai Grepher isn't the only one commanding the scaled ones here. I'm pretty confused though. We see a lot of Grepher standing shoulder to shoulder with other warriors in a war zone, but like, who are they fighting? Like, aside from the odd dragon and a big shadow zombie, they aren't shown fighting against, like, an opposing army. And, you know, if I can be annoying about this for a second, we've cried havoc, but I have not seen them let slip a single Dog of War. Who's gonna let the Dogs of War slip? Who? DD Post is a continuous trap card that gives monsters you control a 300 attack boost for each card type among your banished cards, counting monsters, spells, and traps. Once per turn, during the main phase, you can banish a card from your hand or grave, then you can shuffle one of your banished cards into the deck, and if this card is banished, you can place it face up on your field. This is currently the latest card that we've gotten in the game that is part of the Dai Grepher multiverse, and honestly, I kinda like it. I like it a lot. If you're running any kind of banishing in your deck, you could end up getting this onto the field for free and getting yourself a nice chunky attack boost. Get all 3 card types banished and you're looking at a board-wide 900 attack boost. And it even comes with a way to manipulate the kinds of banished cards that you have while recycling them. If your deck is built for banishing, this should just be in your deck as a matter of course. But Grepher, dude, it does not matter how much you try to write this woman, she will not duel you again. And that is all the Warrior Dai Grepher cards that we have so far. I'm positive we haven't seen the end of this guy, and I can't wait to see where this bumbling brawler will end up next. But before we wrap this up entirely, I want to go over a brief list of connections that you might find funny. One of the major draws of having monster crossovers with each other like this is that we get to see what cards exist in the same continuity, and boy howdy do we have a doozy for you. First up, the connection with DD Warrior Lady and the rest of the DD continuity also brings in the DD continuity, but this time with a slash in it. Aragiakuba's theme ropes them in from time to time because I guess having 2 themes named DD is pretty funny, and they're right. But these connections are no laughing matter. DD Recruits has Warrior Lady and a few friends taking an audience with the Royal from Imperial Customs, who themselves shows up in a bunch of cards, and has regular dealings with the DD. This in turn connects to King of Yami-Makai, Chain Thrasher, Darkblade, and Pitch Dark Dragon by way of DDD Headhunt and Dark Contract with the Yami-Makai. Moki Moki is here by means of a themed pastry in DD Reroll. The Elder monsters are shown in Dark Contract with the entities. Dark Contract with the Swamp King gives us the King of the Swamp, as well as presumably all of the Mud Dragon cards, and Dark Witch via Dark Contract with the Witch. Dark Contract with Errors has a Fiendish Chain on it, but I'm not really sure how to parse that one, so we're just moving on. But now for the good stuff. Check this out. The Winged Helmet Warrior who still does not have a card is shown in Marmaduke Captain, which connects us with Field Commander Roz, Freed the Matchless General, and of course, Marauding Captain. Now, Freed also goes on his own big multiversal journey with GoldenNovaYugioh, who themselves is also in this art, and like we saw earlier, is in premature return in its baby form. And while they were a wee lad, GoldenNovaYugioh was Gigabyte, and during that time he was a familiar of Area, the Water Charmer. The Charmers are a group of 6 monsters that include Wynn, the Wind Charmer, and for those of you who have not been paying attention to my dual terminal videos, Wynn is canonically the sister of Winda of the Gusto tribe, which means that through a long, convoluted chain of events, there is a slight but altogether possible chance that we'll see a DD scout plane taking recon photos of whatever Girsu's doing in the post-story World Legacy world, while Vanaminaga, the deity of poisonous snakes, sees how they stack up against Tierra and Sophia, because, like I've said before, everything is dual terminal. Roll the credits! Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales that even come with their own lore, and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Upstairs Media, and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Kane Senpai, Charlie Mercury, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hair Bear, Happy Majin, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Marion James E. Picata, Mike Cook, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yami Nair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Bactboos, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sonic 21 Blast, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vatnia, Animasta, Anthrak, Baron von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzebub, Fish, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Charlie Mercury, again, Chaz Ghost, Dr. Entity RIP, Eva Padilla, Gary Lickbread, Hike Boyajian, Herbal D, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Natiel Lee Alexander, Nitromo, Not Al Gore, Nyx, Obsidian, Pombo, Rain, Rhyme Kairos, Shizuka Nijimura, Sirnite JCB, Sophie, apparently, Sphilia, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Weasel King of Weaseltown and Zaldareka, as well as all the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you want to see some of the dual terminal story that I've already covered, you can check out my playlist for it right here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.